sweatshirt.
Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And I'm here today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going today, Bill?
It is going good, thank you. I got my walk-in this morning and raring to go. Of
Oh,
course,
good.
I've been going since 6 this morning, but anyway.
Nice. Well, anyways, I was going to say my COVID seems to have kind of
Oh yeah.
ran its course.
Oh, good,
And
good.
yeah, so my voice is returning a little bit more to normal, not coughing as much. Still have a runny
Great,
nose, but that's
good.
about it. All right, so let's start out. Well, for starters, we got an article about the U.S. Air Force and electric aircraft. Um, what's going on with Ethiopia's gas car ban?
Yeah.
What's going on with Cuba and EVs? And then we'll have 10 EV startups that have already filed for bankruptcy. I'm sure some of the haters will love that one, right? Um, Anyways, I can just see the go woke, go broke
Yeah,
comments all
exactly.
over that.
We're broke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So the U.S. Air Force successfully completes test flights of all electric aircraft. It's going to make things faster and simpler. Now, I love the idea of the EVTOLs. Okay, they look cool. It just basically, people look at a drone. It's a drone that's big enough to haul a human, right?
Right. Yeah.
Or four. Okay. Um, I assume they're quieter than a, an aviation fuel powered engine. Um, and obviously they're greener. I'm curious what the Air Force has in mind for this. Is it going to lower operating costs? What's going on here, Bill?
Well, I think what they're looking at is, first of all, they obviously have missions and they have vehicles to accomplish that mission. So they decided to look at something like, this is the Beta, that's the name of the company, eVTOL, to see where it might fit in some of the missions and possibly replace or improve the utility of their current means of transportation. So that could be land vehicles. That obviously could be things like helicopters. This, I suspect, is they're saying this is a role for emergency evacuation. I know with this particular set of trials that they did with this vehicle, they were using it to for example, to fly a patient, in a simulated situation between two military bases where they're two hospitals that they can run him to, as well as doing, logistics support, because this thing can obviously take off straight up and, fly 20 miles or whatever. And they might do that trip in which my car might take, half an hour or, an hour, depending on where it is and the roads and things. This would allow them to maybe do that in minutes. So they're just, I don't think they understand and have a complete profile. So that's what this is about: is buy it, test it, and find out what kind of a profile and where in our mission does this particular type of vehicle fit. Obviously, because it's electric, it has an advantage over helicopters. I don't know if anybody's done any cost analysis yet, but to fly a military helicopter, a Huey or a Black Hawk or something like that, is horribly expensive. I mean, it's hundreds, if not thousands of dollars an hour. And, they've for every hour you fly, there's got to be, I don't know, and probably please
The
somebody,
maintenance.
the maintenance, they got to spend 5 hours on the ground, to just in maintenance and things. And these, because it's just electric motors, basically. And of course, there's some gearing and things to, rotate the props and things like that. But it has to be simpler for them to maintain. And of course, that's what they're trying to figure out: is this a better option than buying our helicopters or what is it, the V-22 Osprey, and which is itself is horribly expensive to operate, as well as dangerous. They've had to ground them with unfortunate regularity because of issues with them. So is this a better option for them? And that's what they're trying to figure out.
Well, the war in Ukraine has taught us a few things, about the military use of electric vehicles, everything from electric scooters, e-bikes being
Yep.
used because they've been useful because unlike a motorcycle, they don't really make any sound.
No noise,
And
and there's no heat signature.
oh, and that's a big thing too if some
Yeah.
people are flying drones looking for heat signatures. So there's a lot of possibilities, I guess, there. And I assume an electric aircraft like this could potentially have no real heat signature there as well, maybe. I don't
Well, it
know
depends
how
on if
that would
it's,
work.
yeah, it depends on if it's battery or if it has some kind of a gas turbine mounted somewhere in it that, is connected. Instead of blowing hot air out the back to move forward, it takes and, has a generator attached to it. And that generator provides charge power to the batteries, and the batteries then feed the electric props. So,
Yeah,
they
I guess there's
all of them
different
are a little bit. I
possibilities.
think these was it. This one I'm trying to think. I think they did something like over 200-mile mission with it, flying between two air bases and things. So they're trying to figure out where's the utility. And I think if the utility's there, you'll probably see some orders placed.
I've been on some calls with the Army with talking about, equipping, bringing more electric vehicle utility to the military. And I think they recognize a lot of it, at least for the next 10 years, is going to be more about what can we do on the local bases. It's not so much for
Oh,
deployed
yeah,
situations, but all the vehicles
absolutely.
they have running around the base could go electric, things like that. They're not
Right.
talking about making troop transports go electric, things like that. They're talking about things that are more back in the area, not in the combat zone. They're not looking at trying to figure out how they're going to get battery powered vehicles
Yeah,
charged.
exactly. Yeah.
It's already a challenge enough getting gas
I
to
think I
combat
remember.
zone.
Yeah, I think I remember calling that the Navy has actually been running some tests to generate while at sea, because most of there are a handful of ships like the aircraft carriers that are nuclear powered, and the submarines,
Hmm.
but most of the support vehicles and aircraft protection, frigates and destroyers and that class of vehicle, uh, those vehicles are still powered by gas turbines or some form of fossil fuel to propel them. But have been doing apparently some studies that how do we, while we're at sea, how do we take the resources, the ocean, the whatever else is there that they can take and make fuel out of it. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, because you could see an aircraft carrier, instead of having to periodically have a fueling ship come alongside to pump aviation fuel for their jet aircraft and their helicopters and things, make it on board the ship. And that's one less vessel that you have to worry about rendezvousing with or having, be attacked. It's that type of thing. So, yeah, there's all kinds of experiment and work going on. They're thinking about it. And part of that has to do with simply a mandate. I mean, the Pentagon, for much to the chagrin of the climate deniers, the Pentagon knows that climate change is a serious, potentially politically disrupting and violence causing event. And so they have been mandated for the last 10 years or longer to look at ways, what is going to be the impact of climate change on geopolitics, and how do we respond to that with our mission to protect and defend the United States and the Constitution. So they're serious about that. And despite comments about there'll never be electric tanks and things, well, you never know. Maybe at some point there will be, because we're making incredible. The Chinese certainly are making incredible progress on high energy density batteries and things.
Right.
So the fact I saw the latest thing is that the former president has now taken aim at the Chinese battery plant that Ford is working with. That's his latest complaint, is that the Chinese are trying to spy on us by building this battery plant in Michigan. So, it's an ongoing thing, but this does impact our military. So it's kind of encouraging to see them exploring, what's the potential use of eVTOLs. If you could, in fact, I think if I remember reading, they were actually doing some work with remote controlled or autonomous eVTOLs to rescue, injured servicemen in the field. So rather than sending in a Black Hawk with, a crew of 3 or 4 people on board to rescue somebody that's been injured, they can,
send a drone,
send the drone in and have the medic there load them in, and get them out of there without the potential loss of, crew. I don't know if you've watched any of the Democratic convention, but they had Tammy Duckworth on, and Tammy is I think she's a senator from Minnesota, and she is a double amputee.
Oh, Lord.
She walked out, onto the podium there to give her speech, with her legs missing. She's got, prosthetic devices.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened because, if I memory serves, she was a helicopter pilot who was shot down
mm-hmm.
in Iraq. And that's how she ended up losing her legs. So to spare other, highly trained people that we spend a lot of money on to train them, you just send a drone in there. And God, the people in Ukraine have done incredible. There is going to be a huge, once this war is over, and it looks like it might be getting close to wrapping up.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, who knows? But when Ukraine comes out of this, and I'm assuming they're going to have their independence still, there's going to be a lot of interest in the technology they developed in the way of the electronics and the aerodynamics, the aircraft and things like that they have developed because of that war. They have done remarkable things with that technology.
Oh, yeah, there's no question. Well, I could see these being used particularly in search and rescue, without a manned pilot, but like we were talking about before, things should be much quieter than a Black Hawk too.
Oh yeah, I mean, we every now and then we have those those helicopters go over because we've got an air base just over here a few miles away,
right?
And wow, you can hear them from miles and miles off. Now, I have a drone, one of the little toy, consumer drones.
Yeah.
And once it gets up about 300 feet, I can't hear it. But in that range below that, once it gets within a few hundred feet of, a few feet of me,
right? But you know what I mean. It's not going to attract, so much attention. My favorite thing to see fly around here is the B-2, when the B-2 flies in from wherever they're based. I think they're based in Missouri. And oh man, it just looks like it's something from outer space.
As we might let everybody know, this weekend here in Omaha, just over at Offutt Air Force Base, we're having our air show. And
there is.
Yes. And because I'm a member of the local EAA chapter, Experimental Aircraft Association chapter, I'm going to be there on Saturday in the EAA booth, which is, I actually get early access to all of that stuff, which is really cool.
Oh, so fun.
I'll take lots of photos.
Nice. Love to see it. Love to see it. Yeah, I'll be in Tulsa playing a tennis tournament in 98-degree heat on Saturday.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Anyways, it's pretty cool to see some of this. I just always wonder where some of this will go with aviation. And you were talking about what's going on in Ukraine, and it doesn't seem, it's kind of a weird war in that neither country really has the resources and manpower to go occupy territory. So Ukraine may have taken this territory, but it's not like they can really expand out of that, because they could we could go this direction, or this direction. But if we do that, we're leaving this direction uncovered.
Yeah. The whole purpose of that was to embarrass Putin.
No, I get that. I think they've done a good job of that.
Is to weaken Putin's credibility within the elite of the country, and then eventually at some point, they have said the media is so controlled over those people. For the most part, have no clue what's going on with that war, and then
No.
500,000 casualties and deaths.
I mean, that's almost the American Civil War.
Yes, exactly. Of course, we don't know what the Ukrainians, but we can figure there's, a few 100,000.
It's probably similar.
It's
probably similar. Yeah.
And they have no clue, other than the few that can be able to tap into outside media and are willing to suspend their disbelief and listen,
right.
and listen to listen to what the outside forces, Russian controlled media have to say. So.
Right. Yeah. I have had a hard time believing that most Russians really have a clue what's going on there.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's talk about Ethiopia. Now, we did a video on Ethiopia once. It was probably the most hated video we've ever had.
Really?
I had the most hateful comments ever,
About what? What were they upset about?
The Ethiopians are banning gas cars. Do they even have toilets? Stuff like that. I just had lots of just stupid comments. And it was hilarious, but there was hundreds of them. Hundreds of these just stupid comments.
There is a reason beyond trying to get Ethiopians out of their gas-powered cars, because they want, obviously, bringing all these cars in means all that money is leaving the Ethiopian economy, right? So this particular measure, at least in the way I look at it, is intended to try to encourage internal production. So one of so gasoline vehicles, ICE-powered vehicles, are not banned in Ethiopia as long as they are manufactured in Ethiopia.
Right? Okay. So they added that to it.
So what happens is you can send in kits of electric vehicles, be they scooters, be they motorcycles, even be they cars, right? You can bring them in, as assemblable kits. And as long as they're assembled in Ethiopia by Ethiopians, you can still have those vehicles. What I published this because it's interesting is that the ruling came down from the Ethiopian government, is that the diplomats were saying, "Oh, we have diplomatic immunity, and we want to drive our gas. We want to import our gasoline cars and drive them." And Ethiopian ministry said, "Nope, you gotta meet the obligation just like every other Ethiopian in the country." But obviously there's an environmental side of it, but I think more importantly, there's an economic side of this. We don't want all that money leaving the economy. Let's encourage manufacturers to do what Chinese are doing. Build a factory here, right, and assemble the vehicles here.
Well, so one thing to keep in mind, in a country like Ethiopia, gas stations are not common. They have more access to electricity to charge cars than people have access to petrol too. So there are some changes. The average person in Ethiopia has never been in a car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So I mean, they're that rare. Most of the cars in Ethiopia are taxis.
Yeah. It's very privileged. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it is not a high percentage. I remember checking, and I think only 40-something% of the country has access to electricity, and a much smaller portion would have access to fuel.
And again, I don't think they have any oil wells or gas facilities in the country. They probably
it's all hydro
imported.
It's all hydroelectric.
They do have. I suspect probably comes from Libya, which would, I think, probably
that was another reason why they wanted to do the ban. That was another reason because they wanted to stop importing fuel
coming out of Saudi Arabia.
And if you think about this from a government perspective, I think energy independence for your country is kind of important. Okay, you should have food independence, energy independence. You want a country that you can sustain yourself. And in their particular case, they needed energy independence, and they can produce all of their own electricity in their country. Okay, so to power the EVs. And so that has a, little bit of an effect on there that maybe it wouldn't have, in some other countries. A lot of the hateful comments I got about Ethiopia was the fact, do they even have cars,
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's like, well, there's not necessarily a lot of cars in the country, but you can still buy used cars, no problem. It's just that there's no more importing
New
gas
ice
powered
cream.
new.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, probably new or used. But let me see. They have a new. They've been working on more energy for the country, and Ethiopia recently commissioned the first units from a 5,150 megawatt Renaissance Dam project. Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD. GERD will add 15.5 gigawatt hours of clean electricity to the country's energy mix.
There you go.
Yeah, this means Ethiopia has some exceptionally good locally generated renewable energy that can be used to substitute a significant portion of that huge import bill. Now, one of the things too, when you're in a country that doesn't have a real high standard of living, for people to have electricity, I mean, I look at what, some houses here probably use as much electricity as what people average may make in some of these countries. But what's different is when you're hydroelectric is really cheap to produce. I mean, we're talking like 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour to produce that. Now, in all fairness, if you compared that like to Nebraska, it's probably a 70% savings over Nebraska electricity, which is cheapest in the whole country.
Yeah.
So it's still, now it's not saying that they're producing it for that in Ethiopia, because I've looked at what the kilowatt hour costs are for electricity all over different countries in Africa, and some of them were embarrassingly high. They might as well have been like New York State or something like that.
Yeah. Hawaii.
I mean, yeah, or Hawaii, because the rates were so high, and I'm just like, really, this little African country has just an incredibly expensive electricity rates when you can produce from solar, hydro, wind. You can produce 3-4 cent a kilowatt hour power, and so they're doing something wrong in those countries. I don't know what it is, but they're doing something wrong, or they just don't have access.
Maybe there's people with vested interest in fossil fuels of various shapes and sizes that are resistant to that. So,
well, Bill, I heard actually some opposite things. So some of the access to the World Economic Fund or whatever, WEF, won't support some of these countries if they do use fossil fuels. And so the lack of using coal or LNG is keeping them in a situation where they really have very little energy to start with. But what they really need is nice big solar farms and battery packs.
Yeah.
But somebody has to invest that money in those countries, and interest rates are high, and it just doesn't it just doesn't do well.
You're reading Paul's comment about getting motion.
Oh yeah, I just saw that.
I would, yeah. Sometimes it's a little distracting.
Yeah, we've had it for probably 6 months.
Yeah, maybe it's time we think about something a little less.
Hold on. Let me.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Paul. We appreciate the comment.
Yeah. There. I'll turn it off for today.
There we go. We don't want our viewers.
We have another one. We got another one that moves a little more liquidy, but or we could have we got another one that does bubbles. So anyways, yeah, I'll turn it off for a bit, but that is kind of funny. Anyways, but yeah, this is the first time we've ever had a comment about the background.
Yeah.
Anyways, but you just look at some of the ways. Yeah, but look at some of the ways that energy is generated, and some of these countries would probably be further along in some respects if so they're using the WEF money for some stuff, but they're not using it to give power to their population. So there's some plus and minuses going
Yeah,
on there
sure,
that,
sure.
people are, well, it's also one of the things. I'm not saying that the nitrogen based fertilizers that are made from petroleum, they have their own host of problems in farming. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah, yeah,
nitrogen based.
yep.
So they certainly help in some ways, but in the long run, um, they cause problems with the long-term viability of the soil.
Yeah,
So if you use
yeah, I can
those
go
too
off on a
much,
whole other
yeah,
tangent on
no,
that
I
subject.
get that. I get that. But at the same time, some of these countries, so in the whole world, African countries fertilize their farms the very least by a massive margin. It's
Yeah,
like they like maybe 100 to, so the most fertilized are in India and China, and it's like 100, almost 100-fold difference in
yeah,
the amount of fertilizer used to grow
yeah.
crops.
Around here, it's just a very common sight to see a great big white tank being pulled, behind a tractor in the field in the spring, and these big booms out, where it's,
Hmm.
spreading the anhydrous ammonia on the field, and of course that basically all ends up down in the Missouri and into the Mississippi and into the Gulf, and creates huge, hundreds of square miles of dead zone in the Gulf. So yeah,
Yeah, it's got its own negative connotations, but
yeah,
you got this thing, like I keep going back to, okay, we can have this or people can starve to death,
right.
and where is that happy medium
Or yeah,
between
or we
people,
can figure out, or we can figure. I heard one time that the amount of nitrogen that is available to plants, uh, just in the air above. Let's take an acre of ground, and I don't remember exact numbers, but they put what 700 pounds of fertilizer on the artificial nitrogen fertilizer on the ground to stimulate growth. But if we could get the soil chemistry and the soil bacteria and mycology right, that in the right combination, there's hundreds or even thousands of times more nitrogen available in the air for free, right?
hmm,
So we just have to figure out how to get that balance. What we've done, we've just taken this sort of cheap, quick shot of, well, just spread a bunch of nitrogen on it. And the reason they're doing that is because we ran out of seabird poop. That's how they literally. That's what they would use to mine the islands off of the west coast of South America to
hmm,
extract the guano, which was of course bat
right.
and also seabird poop, and they would load that in ships, send that around the Cape Horn, all the way back to Europe to put on the fields. And eventually they used, over the course of 20, 30 years, whatever it was, they basically stripped that source. So they had to find some other source of fertilizer. And this is about the time of the First World War, when we started getting into development of chemical weapons and things. And they figured out that they could create the out of petroleum or whatever, they could create these artificial fertilizers to replace the bat guano. So
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying there's all these other quandaries that kind of exist,
yeah, yeah,
where you got a plus and a minus, either people starve or we fix the planet,
right,
and
yeah.
it's just like my argument about the cobalt, mining. It's like, hey, let that kid work if he wants to eat, you
Hey,
know.
but you know what? Well, so I looked that up. So this question came up, and today, so I asked my favorite artificial intelligence assistant, Pi. Okay, what is the comparison between cobalt that is used in oil refining and that which is used in batteries? And it turns out that using it in, there's a few thousand pounds or whatever it was, or no tons, sorry, a few hundred tons that are used to refine petroleum. It's used as a catalyst along with molybdenum to take and pull sulfur out of high sulfur fuels, like out of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Okay, but then it came back and said, yeah, but there are many times more tons of cobalt that is used in batteries, right? So I thought, well, that's kind of that's kind of crappy. I was hoping it was the other way around, right? Well, hey, if that's the facts, you got to go with it. So then I asked, well, okay, so how much of that is recyclable, right? And they said, well, pretty much 99% of the cobalt molybdenum catalyst that is used in oil refinery is recycled. So they can get, I think it's something like 6,000 tons, 60,000 tons, or some number in that range. I can't exactly remember. But anyway, so you can, after it's refined so many times, you have to pull it out and you have to recycle it. And so you can just basically keep recycling. I guess you add a little fresh cobalt or molybdenum into the combination, but you can keep recycling it over and over again in oil refining. And you can do the same thing with batteries. You run the batteries, through the grinding machine, and you get this black mass, and you can use various processes to pull out. And over 90, I think it's like 96% of the cobalt can be refined and put back in batteries. So it's not like, we're going to have these slave kids, working these holes. And and in Australia is one of the leading sources of cobalt, and they don't use slave kids. They use great big scoops and shovels in these giant trucks to get to the cobalt. So
well, hopefully by the time those slave children are older, they'll be able to go to work in battery recycling plants.
There we go. Exactly.
The thing is, we both know with the change in chemistries on batteries that by the time those batteries ever go to be recycled, we'll stop using cobalt and be using something else.
We'll find something else to use. Yeah. Well, sodium batteries and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on and let's talk about Cuba. So this little country that got overthrown by a guy who went to Harvard and played baseball at Harvard, got his leftist indoctrination probably at Harvard, this guy named Castro, and his legacy still goes on. And supposedly, I always say supposedly these countries call themselves communist when they're really just a dictatorship.
They're an autocratic oligarch in the guise of a political robe, right? It's either a leftist robe or a communist. In fact, I came across an article today where I just felt compelled. Well, I don't know if I even published it, but the thing was, it was talking about the Michigan battery plant, right? That what is it? CATL is working to try to construct there with Ford Motor Company, and this Tampa-based newspaper, quote unquote tabloid, was talking about that the ex-president was lambasting this Chinese communist battery plant, and I thought, well, basically, if you listen to the guys that are the commentators and the pundits of modern day China today, they say it's only communist in name only. It is in fact really a capitalist, fascist government, right?
Yeah, it's National Socialism.
It's National Socialism now, and So I was going to change the thing to instead of communist, I was going to put fascist, but then I said I don't. I'm going to pass on that one for that particular story.
No, a lot of these countries that claim to be one. Well, it's like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea or whatever, the DPRK.
Right.
It's like. Or Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Yeah. Anyway,
Congo's the same way. Right?
Yeah.
And East Germany was the same way, right? It
Yeah.
was the DDR or something like that, Deutsche Demokratische Republik.
Yeah. No, but anyways, so you've had your own experiences with EVs, but let's talk about what's going on because the article that we have here, well, it came from South China Morning Post. That's interesting
Yeah,
that it's talking.
exactly.
Okay, so let's, but it's a Chinese company is trying to do a partnership with a company in a state-owned company in Cuba.
Of course.
My big concern is who in Cuba can afford anything? I'm
Well,
like,
yeah.
well,
Well, here's what happened. Once Fidel passed over the control of the government. This is obviously before he died, but when he got to the point, he said, "I'm going to turn it over to my brother Raul." They began to implement certain changes because this country here economically, we've had this 60-year long embargo going on, which I, personally, I think was a misguided. I know what they were trying to do, and it would never actually panned out. They never got rid of Castro. Castro went through 5 American presidents,
at
right?
least,
At least
yeah,
5 American presidents. So the whole embargo thing was a failure, right? So once Raul came in, they began to introduce some economic reform, basically because the Soviet Union had collapsed and they weren't getting the subsidies that were helping the economy stay afloat. And so once Raul took over, they began to introduce these new economic reforms, which basically involved, hey, you can run a capitalist business. And this was then because of that, we saw kind of a loosening of the whole, a modest improvement in relations between the United States and Cuba in the latter years of the Obama administration. There gave people the opportunity. They didn't have to live off of their $400
a month.
a month or whatever it was. I mean, it's but now unfortunately we're back to the same situation going on there again. So these people have gone all kinds of things, but somehow they still manage to get by. I mean, you look at all those, all the classic. If we would open up trade, those guys could become wealthy just by the sale of their 1950 classic cars, right?
Cars, yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Well, the thing is, so many American companies were burned by the regime, and you had so many people that owned property in Cuba that just lost it as a result of the takeover.
70% of the Cuban economy was owned by U.S. corporations.
Mm-hmm.
70%. And so they got a little when Castro came in. I know a little bit about this subject now. I've been doing a lot of research. And when Castro came in, he wanted to get rid of the corruption that was going on. I mean, basically the hotel casinos were being run by the mafia through Santos Traficante Jr. And his allies down there, and they were giving kickbacks, to the Batista government and so on. So it's a whole involved thing there. And so he was trying to clean things up and try to get rid of some of this corruption. Well, unfortunately, that didn't sit well with certain the people that owned the telephone company and owned the refineries. And here was the kicker: they wanted they started this. The catalyst for this whole thing was that they wanted to start refining Russian oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't just the Bay of Pigs and that whole thing, but they wanted to refine Russian oil. And the American-owned oil company said, "No way, we're going to refine Russian oil for you guys." And so at that point, Castro says, "Well, fine, we'll just take you over." And so that began this whole snowball effect of nationalizing pretty much everything, and basically stripping corporations from International Telephone and Telegraph to Shell Oil to, well, not Shell, but Exxon. And most of them are all American-owned oil companies.
And the sugar companies.
well, in the sugar company, but yeah, that wasn't as big I mean, it was a significant part of their economy, but there were ways, we could replace that sugar supply, so it wasn't as big. Um, but those were also, most of those were all owned by, American banks and corporations. Um, so that began the snowball effect of, sending them over, rushing to the arms of the Russians, and we've not made a lot of progress since then. But anyway, coming back to the subject of the story here. So once the Russians bowed out because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, they had to start looking for another ally. And of course, they started turning to the Chinese. And here of late, the Chinese have been making inroads by doing these deals with, for example, Vedka or something like that, to begin doing assembly of, starting off with electric bicycles and electric, what we would call, tuk-tuks, little three-wheel type things for taxis and cargo carrying. And now they have actually started actually working on importing some real automobiles in there and doing assemblies in their factory, which I think is like 20, 30 miles west of Havana. But in addition to that, that all kind of got its start by a gentleman I had the opportunity to interview back in 2015, John Felder, who was a former General Motors executive, who retired, set up business in the Cayman Islands, and began to import electric vehicles, cars in particular, and supplying them to rental car companies through the Caribbean. And he was the first guy to introduce electric cars into Cuba.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So in fact, I'm going to put a pitch in here for, if you are on Netflix, there is a documentary that is about John called Drive to Change. And it goes through all of his struggles over like 15 or so years to introduce electric vehicles into the Caribbean, and in particular into Cuba. So if you're interested in watching that story, it's Drive to Change on Netflix. So John was the guy that did a lot of the yeoman work in introducing electric vehicles to the Cuban people, because obviously they're with Venezuela and all those tensions and things, they are having trouble with keeping the gas tanks of their vehicles filled with petroleum, with gasoline. And electric vehicles are natural for them, although they're how reliable their grid is still another open question.
Right.
So, but I thought it was interesting, because mainly from the point of view is that here's another opportunity for the Chinese to make inroads into America's sphere of influence. So
I don't know that Cuba's really our sphere of influence. It's just our neighbor.
Yeah, well, it's our neighbor, but I'm referring to the larger, because BYD was selling cars into Central America and buses into South America and things like that.
Well, BYD's selling in Canada. BYD's selling in in Canada. So, we're going to see more and more BYD vehicles. It's going to be driven with people with Mexican and Canadian plates.
Yep.
So, it's just a matter of time. All right, let's get to the story everybody's been waiting for. The 10 EV startups that have filed for bankruptcy. Yeah, like I said.
And they're not all American. I went through the list anxiously, thinking, oh my God, we've had that many American companies crash? No, it's Chinese and it's European and it's American companies among the 10. So
yeah, so now in the history of U.S. auto manufacturing, was it 2 companies have not ever filed for bankruptcy? That's Ford and Tesla. So the auto manufacturing business has not been real pleasant, of companies that are over 15 years old. It's not a pleasant business. It's a very competitive business. It's very market driven. And so let's see what we've got here. Here's a picture of
low margin.
Here's a picture of a Lordstown truck.
That's a good looking truck.
Yeah. All right. First one we're going to start with is Fisker. So,
Yeah.
oh, and you know Henrik Fisker.
Yeah, I know Henrik. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
well, I've met him. I've interviewed him in his office in California. So
yeah. Most high profile EV bankruptcy. They filed for Chapter 11 in June of 24. Initial order levels fell short of internal expectations. Fisker had spent the previous months in talks with hoping to be Nissan to buy them out. Didn't happen.
yeah.
And man, you can find some Oceans really
Oh,
cheap.
yeah. It's like what, $15,000 or
Yeah,
some
I
number
mean,
like
there's some
that. Yeah,
crazy deals. I've seen
yeah.
some of those online. The funny thing is, they're only a year old, so they're not eligible for the EV rebate. So that
Oh,
because the car has to be 2 years old, so you can't get their
oh,
EV rebate on it yet.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, let's see. Quality control issues.
yeah, yeah.
Marcus Brownlee labeled the Fisker Ocean as the worst car he'd ever reviewed. I probably didn't help things much, but
No, that did not help at all.
not
Yeah,
everybody knows who Marcus Brownlee is, but still, but it didn't help. Well, this one's kind of interesting. I'd never heard of Arrival. Okay,
yeah. It's a UK company that.
Luxembourg.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, they
UK,
were doing.
Luxembourg.
Yeah, they were doing assembly up in Coventry, I think, is where they were operating out of.
Okay. They were going
And
to
then they
build electric
relocated to
commercial
the United
vehicles.
States. Yeah,
Oh, they did. Okay.
yeah.
Electric bus, a cargo van, a taxi,
Mhm.
the latter in partnership with Uber, and changing market and rapidly diminishing funds. So both the bus and taxi projects cancel, only the cargo van remained. It shifted
And
to a
that,
US
yep. They formed an alliance with a
and
company here in the U.S. Yeah, got
let's
bought out
see.
by I can't remember now who.
Yeah, so one of the things is since they unveiled its first prototype, Ford and Stellantis launched all electric vans, leaving less room for the segment for upstart manufacturers like Arrival. Okay, let's look at this one's never heard of Hi-Fi either.
The Chinese.
Nice looking though.
Oh
It
yeah,
looks it's a really sharp looking color and look to
yeah,
that car there.
yeah.
Um,
They announced, and not long after they announced, they declared. They rolled out their vehicles to not a lot of hype, but rolled it out and then turned around and had to declare bankruptcy. So yeah,
yeah, Hi-Fi is one of China's most recent failures. Its parent company is called Human Horizons, announced its bankruptcy in August 24. China's legal system makes it difficult to file bankruptcy. The situation is usually very dire for those that do end up going bankrupt. Um,
yeah. I would not want to be an executive in that company because these things have so much funding and support within the local government bureaucracies of that particular city or that particular province, and I don't think they look on failure well.
no, they don't. 83% of companies that reach bankruptcy court in China have to be liquidated, compared to only 5% of companies in the US. So
Uh,
most corporate bankruptcies in the United States allow the companies to keep operating, and it's
yes.
designed more as a reorganization of debt so that the
Yeah.
company doesn't have to, lay off all the employees and things like that. Um, but it had 3 cars that it was going to launch, and it was in 23. It was still producing cars and in the process of launching in Europe, but expansion plans were a bit too ambitious. Its parent company stated that it's aiming to emerge from bankruptcy through new investment or a joint venture, but it remains to be seen if it can pull through. Now, here was a big one: Lordstown Motors. So,
Yeah.
20, and I remember because Lordstown was one that it was bidding on replacing the post office vehicles, right? Because
Yes.
Grumman for years had that post office
Yep.
contract, and Lordstown thought it was going to get it, and it ended up going to, of all people, Oshkosh Defense.
Yeah. Well,
And I don't know how Oshkosh
and,
Defense is
and,
doing in producing that.
well, I don't think there's a lot of progress happening. I've not. You don't see many reports on it. But there's a connection between Oshkosh Defense and the current Postmaster General that's just a little shady. So
Really? Oh,
oh yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Did not know
yeah,
this. No, didn't know
yes,
this, but I really thought that Lordstown, it shows a picture of a pickup truck, but I remember them making like delivery vans for like UPS. Weren't they making something
That-
like that?
I don't recall that. I just remember
You don't? Okay.
yeah,
Um,
and it
and
was
it
called
had
Lord's.
investor.
Yeah, it was called Lordstown because it took over the General Motors Lordstown plant in Lordstown, Ohio. And so they ended up getting the plant, I think, for a song and tried to build this competitor to, to his F-150s and, vehicles, Rivians and that class of vehicle.
Now, this is kind of interesting here. So the company reported, so GM was an investor and Lordstown took over the former GM facility,
Right.
but Lordstown claimed they had 100,000 non-binding orders that had been taken. Turns out those were exaggerated, and the SEC ended up filing charges against the company's
Yeah.
former executives. Yeah, that's not a good look.
No, that is not.
Yeah, I really hate seeing crap like this. It's just like the whole deal with Nikola letting the truck roll down a hill to try to show
Yeah.
it was running on hydrogen.
Yeah.
Will Nikola ever recover from that? We've seen some hopes that something might change.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you can't do that. You can't go and try to mislead the investors.
Yeah.
And just don't know what to think about some of that.
Not that pulling that kind of thing is a new stunt. Didn't Steve Jobs do that? There was something that I forget which product it was that they were going to reveal that didn't work, and so they sort of fake their way through the demo. Yeah, so that's.
Oh, I don't know what I hadn't heard about that.
It worked for them because other than they're first $1 trillion company. So
yeah, I mean, you look at the original, some of the Microsoft Windows rollouts, and they got the blue screen of death when Gates is up doing
yeah,
up doing his presentation, and it's like, oh, typical.
yeah.
But anyways,
So who else we got on the
but
list?
let's see, we got Elms, another company I never heard of. Elms, let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, this was a startup merged with a SPAC, and which was really popular for 2-3 years. It was Electric Last Mile Solutions. Well, I know who owns Electric Last Mile Solutions. It's Mullen Automotive. It went public in 21 through the SPAC, but in 22 it declared bankruptcy. Electric Last Mile Solutions aimed to manufacture small electric cargo vans at its factory in Indiana. Well, they're actually now delivering those electric cargo vans. I know some universities are buying them and some others are buying them from Mullen. But Mullen did a really good job of buying up a lot of cheap assets. They bought Nikola's battery division. They bought this fairly inexpensively. Yeah, and they bought Bollinger Motors. So they bought several things. Now, Mullen doesn't seem to have, they're not a company that's just kind of hosed their investors, but they've done some things that, I don't know. I mean, the acquisition of the assets they've done has been very strategic, and I think priced right, that looks really good on the balance sheet. But here it says Mullen itself is now reportedly in deep financial trouble. Reportedly, they just always seem questionable. They've always seem to have lots of cash reserves. WM Motor is our next one.
Chinese company.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Filed for bankruptcy in October 23. It sold 30,000 vehicles in 22, which isn't a small number. When we look at some of the U.S. EV manufacturers that barely have broken 10,000, 30,000 is quite a few.
Yeah.
12% of its annual production capacity. Who knows? Rising raw materials costs and oversaturation of the Chinese domestic market.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. The car business is a tough one. Oh, Proterra. Well, I'm really
Yeah,
familiar
oh,
with Proterra
yeah.
because I have people still contact me asking me, is there anything I can do with my stock? You know, different things.
Yeah.
Proterra got sort of split up. So acted as a supplier of both charging equipment and battery packs for other EV manufacturers besides making its own electric buses. Um, I think the bus brand was bought by a electric bus brand out of Phoenix, like Phoenix Motors or something like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their battery division was bought by someone else, like
Yep.
maybe a Volvo brand, I think.
I
Um,
don't recall.
yeah. Oh, here it actually goes into it here in the article. Um, Proterra's journey through bankruptcy was relatively brief, with a significantly slimmed down version of the company emerging in March 24. Its bus manufacturing was sold to Phoenix Motor Cars, so I did remember right, for
Yeah.
reported $10 million, while Volvo Group snapped up the battery manufacturing division for $210 million.
You got
The
great
latter,
memory, my friend.
yeah, the latter deal included Proterra's nearly new battery production facility in South Carolina, which only completed construction in January 23. Post bankruptcy, Proterra retained its charging equipment division and continues to operate in its new, much reduced form. Next one is Byton. Now, Byton sounds like it would be a UK company, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound like that'd be a UK brand?
Yeah, it
But
would.
anyways, it's another Chinese company,
Yep.
founded in 2017. By 2020, they were suspending staff. A series of rescue talks with various investors. Company was forced to declare bankruptcy. You and I talk about this all the time about how much consolidation we think the EV industry
Oh,
needs.
there's gonna be a lot. Yeah.
Legacy car makers to survive probably need to be acquiring some of these, maybe not these Chinese companies, but you think more and more of these Chinese outfits would be consolidating. So, who knows? All right, the next one is Unity.
Yeah,
Unity is,
this one I'm really disappointed because that is such a cute little car. I like that car.
it is. It's a little bit like the Smart for Two
Yeah,
car,
yeah. Only a little bit
and
more aerodynamic and sort of futuristic, and yeah,
it needs a smile down here. You need to draw a smile
exactly, exactly.
on the
Just change
car
the name.
there.
Yep.
Yeah. City cars have always been natural candidates for electrification, as long range isn't important for cars set to spend most of their time stuck in urban traffic. Let's see what we got here. A 67 horsepower, 186-mile range electric car, priced at about $19,300. Orders opened in the UK and Unity's native Sweden in 2018, and more than
Hmm.
3,000 customers put down a deposit. In the end, production was too much of a hurdle. I've heard Musk talk about this. It's easy to make a prototype. It's a whole different thing to actually
Oh,
manufacture.
like the manufacturer, yeah.
Yep. All right. Here's a company, Jidu, which maybe, or Jidu, maybe the Chinese people are okay with ugly cars. These would not work in the United States. Um, while a big wave of EV startups have gone bankrupt, this one was one of the first car makers to bring an affordable EV to the Chinese market. And by 2017, it became China's second largest EV manufacturer. A policy change in 2018 with EVs with short range no longer benefited from the generous government subsidies that had
Yeah.
driven Jidu's early sales. China car market moves rather quick. Jidu started feeling the effects of the subsidy cuts. It was too late. Rival manufacturer offered more capable cars at equally competitive prices. Market share dropped. It was enough to force the company into bankruptcy by 2019. Let's see. It would turn out the story wasn't over. Half a decade after the initial bankruptcy, new investors resurrected and launched a new microcar called the Rainbow. Orders opened in March 24, with the car starting at less than $5,000. Its new backers include Geely, so we got some consolidation. The
Hmm.
automaker that owns Volvo and Lotus. It seems Jidu is set to benefit from the deeper investment reserves than before. Whether that translates to higher sales remains to be seen. Anyways,
That's it.
so those were, yeah. So
Yeah.
most of the companies ended up being Chinese. Wasn't so much U.S. stuff, but
Right.
other than Proterra and a couple others. But um, It's interesting to see. We know that at some point, Canoe needs somebody with
Mhm.
smarter management to take
And
over. Mullen's
yeah,
not it.
and,
Mullen's not it.
and doesn't spend half or more than their revenue for the year on jet travel. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
you
that
need uh, you have to say one thing about Elon. It kind of puts his money where his mouth is. They need somebody to sleep in the factory.
yes.
You know,
I I am all for his new what is it, Department of Government Efficiency. That I saw that real funny, the Doge. Yeah, I thought that would just be hilarious. But yeah, come in and fire 80% of the government, see if the government still functions. Oh,
yeah, well, yeah,
dude, that doesn't work. That won't work in the government, but it was
no.
kind of comical that it worked with Twitter. So,
Well,
anyways,
did it really? Have you seen the rash of articles now about him owing banks or the banks having loaned him $13 billion, and now they're getting antsy about being paid?
well, it's not an issue of them being paid. He's not having any trouble paying them. The problem is they wanted to sell off those loans. They didn't want to keep them on their books.
Yeah,
And
I
so
wonder
what they've
why.
not, the problem they've had is that they've not been able to sell the loans. Well,
Yeah,
part of it is when they did the deal, interest rates have also gone up. So their loans aren't worth as much as what they were. So until interest rates come back down, they're not going to be able to sell
yeah.
that paper.
When do you expect that to happen? Is there any hint from the Fed?
Yeah, there is. So I think with the recent restructuring of how unemployment numbers and jobs growth was massively overstated for the past 12 months, there was a correction done on the last 12 months numbers. I think the Fed will. I think at best you're looking though at it going back down a quarter of a point. I mean or a quarter of a percent. It's not going to be like a dramatic
Yeah,
turnaround. But when that happens, the stock market's going to go crazy. So, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out.
so hold on to my Canoe stock. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you might as well. You know, I Canoe still got some teeth. It's just you need that investment that came in to carry it into being acquired by somebody more credible.
Yeah,
So I'm not saying, folks, not that Canoe's a terrible company, but their goal at this point is to be acquired by somebody bigger. They're never going to be
yeah,
a Tesla. That's
no.
just not the situation now. They could be a real brand if GM came and took them over. I think they could effectively be a solid brand if GM could come in and get them producing and putting that there. There's market demand for that product.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I
um,
Well, did you see they got pricing now on the ID Buzz, which is kind of similar, kind of
yeah,
Vanagon, type of vehicle, and that's what $60,000 somewhere, 59 something or
good
other
Lord. Yeah, well, I guess
starting
that's probably
price.
not unusual.
Yeah,
It is a large vehicle, for an EV, whatever, but so that still
yeah,
seems credible. But yeah, you need it. You need some of these companies. You want to see them succeed. There's demand for Rivian. Rivian just needs to be producing. I mean, Rivian's got a nicer product than Hyundai does, and not that Hyundai doesn't have a nice product. Okay, I'm not saying Hyundai doesn't have a nice product. I'm just saying Rivian's a little nicer.
yeah.
But Hyundai
Well,
is about to start cranking out 300,000 cars a year in the United States, and Rivian just doesn't have the ability to produce
that too. And did you see that they shut down production of the van?
for the Amazon van.
Yeah, the Amazon van because of parts shortage. So it's
Oh,
temporary. It's a temporary thing, but yeah, they had to shut down
wow, that's
production
tragic.
production of the van. Yeah, just
I mean,
until
that's
they could
tragic
catch
for
up.
Rivian.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really don't know what to think about something like
yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
that's really terrible news for them.
yeah. Because they've
Anyways,
got what they've delivered 15,000 vans, and they got what, another
85 to go.
85,000 to go. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And
And
that's only an
I didn't
initial
see what,
order.
yeah, I didn't see what the reason, the apparent, again, they said it's a supply chain issue. So what part of the supply chain, whether it's drive system or electronics or, frames or, whatever, brakes, who knows? I don't know what it is.
All right. Well, Bill, we've rambled on for over an
Oh,
hour
we
today.
have.
So
Oh my
yeah,
God.
the stream should have kicked us off for going over an hour. It's
Hey,
not
thank you
doesn't do that.
everybody for
Yeah,
hanging in
appreciate
there.
people